My MIL said I am marrying her son for his money and wants me to sign prenup. I signed it smiling and she flipped after knowing why. When I first met Ethan, I wasn't looking for love. In fact, I wasn't looking for anything at all. I was fully content with my life. I had built a successful career as a financial analyst by the time I turned 30, and I owned my own condo in the city, a sleek 2-bedroom with a balcony overlooking the skyline. My independence was something I took immense pride in. It wasn't just a financial status, it was proof of everything I had overcome. Ethan and I met at a charity gala. He was the son of Malcolm and Patricia Coleman, a family name well known in real estate and finance. Despite the prestige, Ethan wasn't what I expected. There was no trace of arrogance or entitlement. He was charming, witty, and genuine. I was drawn to his warmth and the easy way he could make me laugh. We started dating, and before I knew it, we were in love. It was only months into the relationship that I met his parents. His father was quiet and observant, but his mother? Patricia Coleman was a force to be reckoned with. Tall, elegant, and intimidatingly polished, she greeted me with a cold, practiced smile. She scanned me from head to toe like I was some dubious product she was considering returning. The entire evening, she barely acknowledged my existence, focusing all her attention on Ethan. I could feel the disdain rolling off her in waves. I didn't care much. I was dating Ethan, not his family. But soon, I would come to understand that Patricia Coleman didn't share the same sentiment. Ethan proposed a year later during a getaway to Lake Tahoe. The memory of that day is still vivid, the crisp mountain air, the faint scent of pine, and the way his hands shook slightly as he pulled out the ring. It wasn't flashy or overly extravagant, just a simple, elegant diamond solitaire, and I knew it was perfect. I said yes without hesitation. Soon after, we began planning the wedding. I could feel Patricia's icy glares during family dinners and the subtle jabs she threw my way. She was convinced that I was after Ethan's money. She knew I wasn't from an affluent family. I had grown up with modest means, raised by a single mother who worked 2 jobs. My father had walked out when I was 5, and I had learned early on to rely on no one but myself. It didn't take long for Patricia to make her move. 2 weeks before the wedding, she invited me over for tea, which was nothing short of a corporate meeting. She sat across from me with a thin, condescending smile and casually slid a document across the table. "A prenup," she said. Voice dripping with fake sweetness. "Just a formality, dear." I stared at the document for a moment. Patricia's eyes gleamed with satisfaction, as though she expected me to flinch. I could practically feel her triumph oozing through her forced smile, certain that I would either be offended or alarmed. I wasn't. I simply smiled and took the pen from her. "I'd be happy to sign it," I said lightly. The moment the tip of the pen met the paper, she seemed startled. I could see her mind racing, trying to figure out why I wasn't making a fuss. She had expected outrage or hesitation, but I gave her neither. Instead, I smiled serenely, added a flourish to my signature, and handed the document back to her with steady hands. Patricia blinked. You're not going to read it?" I shook my head, leaning back with a calmness that I knew would unnerve her. "No need. I trust Ethan." Her eyes narrowed slightly, but she couldn't hide the satisfaction in her smirk. In her mind, she had won. She believed she had backed me into a corner and proven that I was nothing more than a gold digger. What she didn't know was that the joke was on her. You see, what Patricia didn't know was that my financial portfolio far exceeded her precious son's. Yes, Ethan was wealthy, but so was I. In fact, I was wealthier. I had built my own company, a financial consulting firm, when I was just 26. I had sold it 3 years later for an 8-figure sum. I had diversified my investments into real estate, stocks, and tech startups. While I kept a modest lifestyle, my net worth quietly climbed into the high 8 figures. Patricia, who had done her research on me, had only found my salary as a financial analyst, one of my many income streams. She never discovered the vast wealth hidden behind private accounts, anonymous investment firms, and off-market properties. She underestimated me. Badly. The wedding day arrived, and Patricia wore a smug expression the entire time. She greeted guests with a performative graciousness but kept shooting me victorious glances. Clearly still gloating over the prenup she had so cleverly orchestrated, as I walked down the aisle, I saw Ethan's eyes light up. He looked at me with pure love, oblivious to his mother's games. When we exchanged vows, I meant every word. I wasn't marrying Ethan for his wealth. I was marrying him because he was kind, because he made me feel safe, and because he was the person I wanted to grow old with. Patricia watched the ceremony with a tightly controlled smirk. She had no idea that I was smiling for an entirely different reason. Dinner at the Coleman estate was as lavish as ever, a long mahogany table dressed with a pristine white tablecloth, adorned with crystal candelabras and fine china. The chandelier overhead bathed the room in a warm golden glow, though the atmosphere was anything but welcoming. The Colemans were old money through and through. Their estate was a sprawling mansion in the countryside, with marble floors, towering oak doors, and oil paintings of their ancestors glaring down from the walls. Every detail screamed wealth and tradition. And tonight, Patricia sat at the head of the table, reigning over it all with her ever-condescending smirk. Ethan and I had just returned from our honeymoon in Greece. The 2 weeks had been nothing short of magical: sunset cruises in Santorini, exploring ancient ruins in Athens, and lazy mornings wrapped in each other's arms. But as I sat across from Patricia now, I could feel the tension radiating from her. She was holding back, barely concealing her disdain. The conversation during dinner was peppered with subtle jabs, as it always was. Patricia couldn't help herself. She smiled graciously at Ethan but ignored me for the most part, only occasionally throwing in a faux polite question about the honeymoon, which she clearly had no interest in hearing about, as the conversation drifted toward finances. She leaned forward slightly, swirling the wine in her glass with an air of superiority. Her eyes glimmered with satisfaction, certain she still held the upper hand. "It was smart of you to sign the prenup, Rachel," she said, her voice dripping with smugness. She flashed me a tight smile, the corners of her lips lifting ever so slightly in triumph. Some women just can't be trusted. I met her eyes with a serene expression, feigning innocence, though my heart pounded in anticipation. The moment had come. "Oh, I agree," I said smoothly, lifting my own glass. "It offers some protection for me as well." The smile on her face faltered. Her brows knitted slightly, confusion flickering across her face. "Protection? For you?" she repeated, blinking in disbelief. I didn't say a word. Instead, I reached for my phone, which was resting beside my plate, and with a few casual swipes, I pulled up an article. My heart thudded with satisfaction as I slid the phone across the table toward her. Patricia frowned and glanced down. Her eyes moved slowly over the headline: "Fintech firm sells for $210 million in private acquisition. Founder Rachel Harper walks away with 8-figure payout." Her eyes widened slightly. She blinked once, twice, as though she couldn't quite process what she was seeing. Patricia, on the other hand, was shaking with poorly concealed rage. The woman who had once regarded me with thinly veiled contempt was now sitting speechless, her face ashen. The wine glass in her hand trembled slightly. She set it down with a clatter. Her lips were pressed into a thin, bloodless line. Her humiliation was palpable. The golden trophy wife she had expected Ethan to marry had just revealed herself as someone wealthier and more powerful than Patricia had ever anticipated. She had orchestrated the prenup to protect her family's fortune, never imagining that she was playing a game she was destined to lose. The rest of dinner was a deliciously awkward affair. Patricia remained unervingly silent, her eyes downcast. Malcolm, Ethan's father, gave me an approving nod. And Ethan? He never let go of my hand for the rest of the night. In the weeks that followed, Patricia's demeanor toward me changed drastically. Gone were the haughty smirks, the veiled insults, and the condescending glances. She became courteous, almost painfully polite. But I could see the tightness around her mouth whenever she smiled, the glimmer of resentment barely hidden behind her eyes. Patricia was seething inside. She had been thoroughly outplayed, and she knew it. At family gatherings, she maintained a facade of civility, but the glances she shot me were brimming with barely contained bitterness. She no longer made snide remarks about gold diggers or made subtle digs at my humble background. In fact, she barely spoke to me at all. She remained cordial in front of others, but we both knew the truth: her disdain had been replaced with shame. And I revealed in it, it wasn't just Patricia who changed. Ethan's father, Malcolm, now treated me with genuine warmth. During one visit to their estate, he pulled me aside while the others were in the parlor. His voice was low and genuine. Patricia, on the other hand, was shaking with poorly concealed rage. The woman who had once regarded me with thinly veiled contempt was now sitting speechless, her face ashen. The wine glass in her hand trembled slightly. She set it down with a clatter. Her lips were pressed into a thin, bloodless line. Her humiliation was palpable. The golden trophy wife she had expected Ethan to marry had just revealed herself as someone wealthier and more powerful than Patricia had ever anticipated. She had orchestrated the prenup to protect her family's fortune, never imagining that she was playing a game she was destined to lose. The rest of dinner was a deliciously awkward affair. Patricia remained unervingly silent, her eyes downcast. Malcolm, Ethan's father, gave me an approving nod. And Ethan? He never let go of my hand for the rest of the night. In the weeks that followed, Patricia's demeanor toward me changed drastically. Gone were the haughty smirks, the veiled insults, and the condescending glances. She became courteous, almost painfully polite. But I could see the tightness around her mouth whenever she smiled, the glimmer of resentment barely hidden behind her eyes. Patricia was seething inside. She had been thoroughly outplayed, and she knew it. At family gatherings, she maintained a facade of civility, but the glances she shot me were brimming with barely contained bitterness. She no longer made snide remarks about gold diggers or made subtle digs at my humble background. In fact, she barely spoke to me at all. She remained cordial in front of others, but we both knew the truth: her disdain had been replaced with shame. And I revealed in it, it wasn't just Patricia who changed. Ethan's father, Malcolm, now treated me with genuine warmth. During one visit to their estate, he pulled me aside while the others were in the parlor. His voice was low and genuine. She stared at the figure listed in the article, a figure that dwarfed anything she had ever assumed about me. Her hand trembled slightly as she scrolled further down, seeing the mention of my real estate holdings and other investment ventures. The color drained from her face. I leaned in slightly, my voice deliberately calm. I signed the prenup to protect my own assets, I explained lightly, as though I were discussing the weather. You didn't actually think I'd let Ethan claim half my fortune if things didn't work out, did you? Patricia's hand clenched around the stem of her wine glass. Her knuckles turned white. I could see her struggling to maintain her composure, her breath coming out in short, uneven bursts. Her eyes flickered from me to the phone screen, as though she were still trying to find a way to disprove what she was seeing. Ethan, who had been mid-conversation with his father, noticed the sudden silence. He glanced at us, confused by his mother's expression. "What's going on?" he asked, his eyes moving from me to Patricia. I turned toward him with a sweet smile and casually handed him the phone. His brow furrowed as he scanned the screen. His eyes widened in surprise. Slowly, he turned back to me, a look of pure astonishment flashing across his face. "Wait, you," he stared at me, blinking in disbelief. "You're the founder of HarpTech?" I shrugged slightly. "Technically, yes. Though I sold it before we met." I smiled sheepishly. I figured it wasn't really relevant. "You loved me for me." I didn't want money to complicate things. For a moment, Ethan just stared at me. Then, slowly, a grin broke across his face, a mixture of awe and admiration. He took my hand in his, squeezing it gently. His eyes gleamed with pride, and I could see the genuine love in them. "God, I love you," he murmured softly, still smiling. "I misjudged you," he admitted. His eyes were steady, lacking the aloofness I had once sensed. "You've proven yourself to be a woman of grace and integrity. I'm glad my son married you." It was a rare moment of vulnerability from a man who was usually as stoic as stone. I gave him a warm smile, appreciating his sincerity. Meanwhile, Ethan and I grew closer than ever. The prenup incident only strengthened our relationship. He had never once questioned my love for him, and now that he knew the truth, he was even prouder of me. "You could have told me," he said one night as we lay in bed, his arm draped over me. His voice was soft, teasing. I smiled and traced small circles over his chest. "I didn't want you to fall in love with my bank account," he laughed softly and pressed a kiss to my temple. "I would have fallen in love with you if you had nothing at all." It was moments like these that reminded me why I had married him, not for his name, not for his wealth, but for the man he was. As for Patricia, she never fully recovered from the humiliation. She remained part of our lives out of obligation, but the power she once wielded over family affairs gradually diminished. She knew she had no hold over me. At family events, she would glance at me from across the room with pursed lips and tight smiles, knowing she had been outmaneuvered in her own game, every time she forced a smile. I met her gaze with calm, serene satisfaction. I had signed the prenup with a smile, and she would never recover from why. Months later, Ethan and I were happier than ever. Our marriage was built on love and trust, not wealth. Patricia remained civil, but I could see the simmering resentment in her eyes. She had been so desperate to protect her family's fortune from the gold digger that she ended up humiliating herself. The irony wasn't lost on me. Every time she forced a smile across the dinner table, I met her eyes with calm, quiet satisfaction.